Hello, everyone. I'm Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspired podcast. Welcome back to the show. Please like it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to support us, please make a donation at spiritualinspired.ca. My guest today is Heather Ivany, a fellow Canadian. She is a yoga teacher and an Akashic record reader. Heather, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me onto your show.
I know that before each interview, you have the habit of opening up the Akasha and do a reading on what's going to happen or to find out about the personality of the show and the host. I have a similar habit. I ask my soul to go out and connect to the soul of my guest for a smooth, fun, and interesting interview. So, if I may ask you, what exactly did you see prior to joining me today?
So how I actually do that is I'll open up the records for you and me for our gathering, and I just ask that the energies of attunement come in to harmonize. But I'm not actually opening your specific records or the podcast records because I need your permission to do that before I do that. So I just kind of open it up for the meeting or the gathering that we're about to have the interview. But if you want to, we can definitely go there if that's somewhere you want to play today. I'm open to it.
Perfect. We'll do that maybe later on the show. I would like to continue by asking you that, in the quantum bylaws, there are a myriad of possibilities. So when you read the Akashic records, do you read the most probable course of action for a client?
When I'm relating to the future or just in general with the client?
In general.
So how I understand it when I'm working with the records is that I'm always working with present moment. And so you're absolutely on point, Claudiu, in the sense that someone's Akashic records is going to contain all the information of their soul's timeline. So that's a very thick book. It's quite extensive. So when I'm working with the frequencies of their particular field or records, how it makes sense to me is that those frequencies act as a filtration system so that the information that comes through and is related through me to the individual, it's specific to what is happening in present moment, and it's definitely information that is relevant to them in the now. And then if we just stretch this a little bit further, if someone asks a future-based question, for me, the future is not entirely written. It's not predestined. So the energy is going to align with the probability that holds the most weight, the line of energy that has the most momentum leaning towards it. So sometimes if I'm going into a future question with someone, there'll be one answer that comes through, and sometimes there'll be three answers that come through, and sometimes there'll be nothing that comes through, just because the future it's not written yet. So it's just potential energy in a sense that you're playing with.
So in other words, the client will have to act on what you say in order for that probability to happen. If he doesn't or she doesn't take any action, the outcome will be different, and the new reading might bring another outcome. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And or it not always acting on the action, but staying the course that they already are on, that's already brought that amount of momentum in already. So either it's confirming for them and just giving them confirmation to just stay the course, or yes, if it's something totally brand new, they would have to take action to pull it from the non-dimensional realm into the physical realm here more fully.
And usually when we do energy healing, our higher self will allow only certain trauma to be healed. And we might have to go through multiple sessions and like peeling the onion layers in order to get to the bottom of it. Do you find in your experience that something similar happens when you read the Akasha? Are you stopped at one point from going deeper?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, no one's ever asked that before. So I like that you're bringing it forward. So it can be both. So if all the layers of the system within the individual, so their emotional layer, their mind layer, their energetic layer, their physical layer, their intuitive layer, if all the layers of the body are ready to release or upgrade, whichever direction that you're working with, it can happen spontaneously. I've had belief systems be completely disconnected and unlinked in the moment, and they've never had to work with that belief system again. But what happens is everything in their whole system is ready to release it. I'm basically just flicking it off the shoulder, if you will. And then if there's something else that comes through and someone is able to release it to a certain extent, exactly what you're saying, then we release it to that extent. And then usually what I'll do is I'll give them some action steps to work on away from our time together. And sometimes the action steps on their own will just continue to release the energetic threads or cords that are connected to that belief system or contract, whatever it is that we're talking about. And they'll be able to do it on their own. And sometimes they come back and they just want to check in to see if there's any sort of tethers still remaining on them. And so we can do a second session, and I can also sometimes give them some action steps to be able to just work on it independently on their own.
Interesting. So in other words, if I understand correctly, trauma can be released during these type of sessions.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, trauma can be released. And I'm always working with like what serves the individual's highest and greatest good. So I won't be taken into trauma if the trauma is going to trigger them into a like back into like a trauma trigger response. And so I won't actually go into it. So the trauma will only present if there's a pocket that's ready to release that serves their highest and greatest good. Yeah.
Yes, interesting. And I heard you talking about your Akashic Records learning curve, and there are three different stages. And after the first stage, you're not sure if what you were reading was your imagination or the real thing. So, for a regular person who will take your course or a similar course, how can he or she make that differentiation?
There's a few layers in there that we work with in the training. So one of the layers is we have these two components of ourselves. We have the part of us that wants to grow and expand. Well, I'll call that the highest self. And then we have the version of ourselves that wants to stay the same. And this is connected to the ego and more the dense human side that's designed to keep this very finite body safe and in health. So both are designed out of love, and both are here to serve the person, and they don't go together. They're like a contrasting energy that doesn't, it's like oil and water. They don't go together. So a lot of what I'm doing when I'm working with the training is that at the very beginning, I'm asking everyone to bring forward the part of them that wants to grow and expand, the part of them that is connected to their highest I am self. And that's the person or the version that I want to be speaking to during the training, so that the egoic self doesn't hijack and take over the experience. Because the reality is this egoic portion of ourselves has been with us our whole life. It has so many arguments that I can't, I'll never be able to win an argument with it. So I'm actually asking the client or the student to do their very best to be able to manage which version of themselves are they putting in the driver's seat in this moment, and allowing me to talk to them. So that's number one. I'm trying to sort of set up the conditions for success before we start.
Yes.
Then if like you're sharing, someone's saying, you know, I can't really tell if it's my imagination, if it's actually the records, and I'm having a hard time with it, then the next step that I'll play with is allow yourself, pardon me, allow yourself to be in a position where you're aware of what the ego is asking. It wants to come in with doubt and fear and disbelief. You're acknowledging it, you're recognizing it, but you're not letting it run the show. So it's not like you're exiling these parts of yourself. They're allowed to be here, but you're making sure that they're sitting sort of on the sidelines and watching and not taking over the experience that they're having. The other component that I'll play with, it depends on the individual, but sometimes what I'll do is when someone starts to receive what I call sort of the conscious stream of information coming in, and then so they start to get a download, that's another way that we'll describe it, of information from the Akashic field. And then if they interrupt that with, oh, I don't know if this is real, I don't know if this is my imagination, then they're interrupting that stream of energy coming in. So it creates a stop-start with them trying to read the records. So sometimes what I'll give them as an invitation is, rather than always changing your attention to the direction of, for the next couple of days, just assume that everything that you're receiving is actual from the records, and start to get the tap flowing and the conscious stream flowing so that you can see where it wants to take you and you can attend to the information that's coming in. This, it's not so much that you're building the confidence with what's real and what's not, but you're building the confidence with letting energy flow through you. And then also building confidence in what's the whole bigger picture of the information that's coming through. And so sometimes that's how I'll play with it, is I'll just say, just for now, quit asking the question, quit getting pulled into the part of the ego that wants to take you into the doubt and the disbelief. And instead just tell yourself everything for now is true. And you just speak in relationship to it to get the conscious stream flowing. And then to stretch it just a little bit further, and sometimes I'll go here and sometimes I don't, but essentially we're working with the field of oneness, and imagination is a part of that field. So there's a very fine line between what is imagined and what is the records. It comes from the same space. So the human constructs of the mind wants to delineate, it wants to separate these two things all the time. But the reality is it comes from the same source. So work with it, play with it, see where it wants to take you.
Yeah, so true. And I can tell you that it's very tricky to work with the ego. And I tried every policy and procedure and trick I was taught. I said, look, I love you. You are my best friend. I am not going to destroy you completely. You're going to come back, but let me be now for 10, 15 minutes to be able to, go deeper into my meditation or do this or do that. And the only times when I was really free of ego and I felt it was when I was part of the sacred plant ceremony. That was at this point, 100% had that feeling of freedom and feeling the soul being a ball of energy.
Wow. Wow. And could you operate in that situation?
Of being free of ego?
When you're in the space of the plant ceremony and the ego's released from you, are you in the body or out of the body?
I think I'm still in the body. I'm conscious, but the
Yeah.
feeling is beautiful. It's the
Yeah.
like elation. You are everywhere and nowhere. And even if I tell myself that I am not in the ego and I try to meditate, I still think that it's watching me. Ego is watching and
Yeah.
looking at every single action and ready to jump in if it feels threatened.
Right. I have a similar relationship in that the part of me that wants to have the experience without it, like the absence of ego, for me, it's a little bit of an indication that I haven't come into the fullness of the relationship with the ego. If there's still a part of me that wants the ego to not be here for certain experiences. So it's almost like the nature, the ego is just being ego. It's in its nature. That's just the nature of the ego. The heart beats when we meditate, even though perhaps we want the complete stillness where we can't even feel the heartbeat, but the heart is just going to be in its nature of beating. So part of what I'm playing with is how can how can I change my perspective of the ego in this moment rather than asking the ego to not be in its nature? Does that make sense?
Yes, and in my opinion, I think it's our responsibilities, daily responsibilities to the family and maybe the community that keeps the ego on. Because the moment you release this type of responsibilities, you can let go. And also, when people say that ego keeps us alive and it kept us alive in the past, I can vouch for that because ego brought me back from a certain death situation. And in a way, I am grateful that that didn't happen because I still wanted to enjoy the beautiful life I have and the years I still have to live. But at one point, I think we have to release, let go of these responsibilities in order to fully comprehend uh, the beauty of who we are in
Right.
spirit.
Oh, well said. Very well said.
Yeah. And you mentioned the when you read the Akashic, you see it as a book. And is that the real version of what you see? Because people might see just, shelves, might see just the etheric field and something approaches them as information. Do you really see a book in which you can turn pages?
No, I don't actually. So I work, how I sort of make sense of the Akashic records and how people relate to them is through people's clairs, so their clair abilities. So claircognizance being that inner knowing of, and it comes in very fast and quick through the mind space. And this one's tricky because people oftentimes can't tell the difference between intellect and claircognizance. And oftentimes people are so advanced with it that they're actually intertwined. And to delineate it and try and separate it is actually messing it up. They work very, very responsibly together. Clairsentient is the visceral feeling inside the body, hair standing up on the neck, inner swirling in meditation, feeling a gut feeling your heart open or contract. So it's a sensory experience. Clairvoyant, as you mentioned, picture form, seeing images, seeing color. And clairaudio is the voice, the sound that arises without the listening ear. It comes from the internal space, and it almost sounds like a thought voice, right? So my two clairs that are strongest in me are actually claircognizance and clairsentient. Clairvoyant isn't one of my top clairs. So when I open the records, I feel it, I sense it. If I'm opening your records versus my records, it's going to feel different opening your records than how it feels when I open my records versus how it feels when we open up the records of a plant or a solar system. So everything that holds consciousness has has an Akashic record connected to it. And they're all very signature. They all have their own GPS signal and they're all very unique. So when I open the records, a lot of people do see, if they're visual, they will see the etheric library. I don't personally see anything when I open. I feel it, I sense it, and then there's just a knowing from my claircognizance that I'm in the records of so-and-so. And then I go from there. And it'll be different each time because it's almost like when I'm in someone's records, I'm in their space. So for example, if someone is a strong clairvoyant, I might, when I'm opening their records, get a visual when I'm opening it because I'm in their records. So my clairvoyant might kick in because I'm reading from their space and I will receive picture forms. But usually it's not a book if I get a picture. It's something connected to their essence. It might be like an ocean or something like that. So, and that's connected to their essence or their
So, in other
soul.
words, their strength can become your strength for a limited period
Yeah,
of time.
totally. And it gets really fun because sometimes even like if someone has a frequency that's very fast, I can talk really fast when I'm in their records to the point where like because it's out of my frequency, I can feel short of breath. If someone has a very relaxed meditative space, then when I go in there, it's very, I'm talking like almost with a drawl, and it's just very slow. I've had experiences where I've been in someone's records and I've been swearing a lot, and I find out later that they're just someone that by nature, they have a lot of swearing in their vocabulary. So even just the way that I'll language and speak to them will be signature to how they understand life. Yeah, it's really
Yes,
cool.
beautiful. Yes, really, really beautiful. Heather, we often talk about the contracts we sign before incarnating in this existence. And I recently heard that there are locked contracts and layered contracts. So when you read the Akashic for someone, from some of your clients, do you encounter these type of contracts, and are you able to release them and negotiate the terms of the contracts?
Yeah. So contracts can serve and contracts cannot serve. So it's really important to understand that not all contracts are negative. Lots of contracts are very well in place and they're operating with a very strong efficiency, so they stay. And some people, I'll get information about that contract, and all we're doing, it's like reading the document, but we're not changing anything in it. We're just identifying what the contract is. I'm sharing it with them so that they can understand either themselves more fully, or the relationship that maybe is connected to that contract. And then what I sort of do is I have a way that I say it is I'll start with asking to just identify any contracts, deals, agreements, belief systems that don't serve this individual's highest and greatest good in all timelines, dimensions, and realities. And then for me, it almost feels like files kind of fluttering in, and I just pause and wait for all the files to come in. Sometimes it feels like there's something very small. Sometimes it feels like a whole, like a weight coming in a sense. And then when that's complete, I'll just ask, are they all identified? If I get a no, then I'll pause and wait for the rest. If I get a yes, then I continue. And sometimes with the individual, it's important to understand if it's a contract or a belief system or an agreement. So exactly what you shared, contracts are predetermined before we choose to incarnate. We make contracts with ourselves. We make contracts with other people. We might even make a contract with an entity from another planet. Belief systems are kind of the ancestral DNA that kind of gets passed down from generation to generation and lifetime to lifetime. So that's a little bit more connected to the human realm. And then agreements, pacts, vows, these are more loose, but they're still significant. So like a child might have an agreement with a parent that when they grow up, they're going to become a doctor. And then as they move into their adult form, they're still honoring this agreement, even though it is not in their nature to be a doctor. They're designed to be doing something completely different. So sometimes I'll ask that they get identified, because it just does help to know, what are we working with? Is it a contract, a deal, an agreement, a belief system? And from there, I ask that it be transmuted energetically, and I can feel or sense if it's completely transmuted or if it's like three-quarter, like sort of like a percentage, like it feels like it halfway got transmuted or it fully got transmuted. But either way, I'll follow up only if the individual requests, like, do you want any information as to what this is about? If they do, then I'll share it with them. And then what's really important, and I think a lot of times we can miss this in the energetic realm, but just because we clear something energetically doesn't mean that it can't retether if we don't have action steps to support the energetic release that we've just clarified. So I'll ask for specific action steps that this individual can do to ensure that they stay on the new path or the new trajectory that their system wants to be working on. Or if it only cleared say 50% of the contract, then what are the action steps that we can do moving forward to help to release or dissolve the remaining parts? So I've never actually heard that expression of locked versus layered, but as I leaned into it in my response, I kind of like that it can be layered, and it can be if something's locked, for me, how I would decipher something being locked is that you might not like the contract, but it is still serving your highest and greatest good and the person's highest and greatest good, and therefore it's not willing to be released.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're supporting your end of the contract and the individual that that you made that agreement with isn't, because when we land here, we get this beautiful sovereignty of free will. And so they can be exploring, let's say it's something as simple as a business collaboration. And so you have certain people that you're meant to collaborate with to form a business. Now, if this person has chosen to be a stay-at-home mom and they're following that line of energy right now, or some other direction, then that contract no longer serves the highest and greatest good for all parties involved, because one side is not fulfilling. They're not listening to the guidance that's leading them in that direction. So then therefore the contract can be dissolved. And I think just one more point is that it's really important to understand that all of what we're doing in the Akashic records is kind of fast tracking or just doing a really thorough job. But like a lot of this we do subconsciously anyways. We marry people, we divorce them, the contract's dissolved, we move on, we carry on. There's no energetic threads that carry with us. So it's really important for the listeners to understand that this isn't a place of superiority where you have to go to an energetic healer in order to release a contract. You have the capacity to be able to do it, but for me, it's the difference between I can make a lasagna in my kitchen without a recipe and see what happens, and I can use a recipe and see what happens. And so that's sort of the difference between like going and seeing someone who lives, breathes, and spends a lot of time in this field, and they can do it in a very efficient and an effective way, versus kind of like aimlessly wandering or walking around. But freedom's there to play with it on your own for sure.
Yes, I agree that in this field and for this type of healing, you need someone who is specialized and knows what to do. And going back to the contracts, agreements, pacts that not serve that particular individual, who is the authority who will approve dissolving the contract? Is the higher consciousness? Are the archangels? Who exactly is working on this type of approval?
A really good question. I'm not going to claim to be an authority of that in any way, shape, or form. How I personally work with the records is I see everything as a frequency. And so when I make it as gentle as that, then it's very easy to understand that sometimes frequencies come in and they harmonize and they attune. And sometimes frequencies come in and it's like cacophony. They're butting up against each other. And sometimes they won't even find each other because there's no like attracts like taking place. So I don't so much as look at it as a personality in the sense of holding the governing stick as to what stays and what doesn't. If I look at it more as frequency, if the energy is not harmonized and attuned, and we place our attention in it, then we can naturally create more space between it. And so that would be what I would call dissolving a contract, but not to think of it as like a judge sitting up high and making those choices. It's such a very religious, old-fashioned, I'll use that languaging way of picturing, and I think it puts us in a place where we start to hand over our authority to something else, and for me it's a very slippery slope if we're going to play with that.
Yes, and I agree with you that you are trying to teach others do what you are doing, because then they will have their own confirmation, validation that what they are reading is real, and they will get their gut feeling and their sensory feelings and everything else about them being in power and healing themselves and doing everything, doing the work by themselves without help, and getting that confirmation. So what you are doing, in fact, is giving people authority over their lives and power over their lives.
Yeah. And if someone is strong as a clairvoyant, then what I'm describing as frequency from my clairsentient, right, feeling the frequency of it, that frequency is going to come in a picture form of perhaps an archangel with wings, the way that we have our paintings depicting them. But it's just so that the frequency can present itself to the individual, not that that is how it actually works. Does that, yeah, does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, again, it's fascinating of how many facets of this work we can talk about and we can use to heal what we are going through in this lifetime and what we went through previous lifetimes. And it's an endless way of healing ourselves, alternatively, rather than using the medical field, which is quite limited.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Heather, some of us look at what's our purpose in this lifetime, and then we want that thing to happen, and we become anxious. How do you deal with this type of situation when you or you want myself or someone else to fall into purpose yesterday, but there is nothing coming through? How can we, become patient?
Well, I think in our Western culture, we're very, our focus can be quite narrow in identifying our purpose as a job or vocation. So when we speak of purpose, it's, for me, purpose is fluid. It's energy. It's not static, meaning it's not a hard line of like, this is what you're going to do and you're doing that for your whole life. I think that for most of us, we're always on purpose. We're always on point with our purpose, and our purpose, because it's energy, is continuously unfolding and becoming into the next stage and growth of itself in harmony with our own personal growth and expansion. And they're the same in a sense. So if someone asked me once, they're like, so now that you're an Akashic record guide, do you feel like you've arrived and that you're on purpose? And I was like, no, like, I feel like I've always been on purpose. I couldn't have been an Akashic record guide in my 20s. I didn't have the toolkit, the skill set to be able to manage that at that time. So at that time, I was on purpose by being a yoga teacher and offering yoga classes. And then as I grew and expanded in the field of yoga, this olive branch of the yogic realm of the Akasha started to open up for me. So that's the one thing that I would just say is that sometimes we need to broaden the lens a little bit of how we look at purpose and seeing it as something that's more fluid than something that's really hard. Seeing it as an expression of your essence, not only the thing that you do to make money in life. And then when someone has sort of the panic of their purpose, I always like I have a very strong trust and agreement when I work with the records that the information that comes through in such a way that the nervous system of the individual can handle it. Doesn't make sense otherwise to give a bunch of information to someone that they don't have a nervous system that can manage it. And so they go into anxiousness and fear and all the things that can happen. So oftentimes I get to watch how the words want to come through when I'm speaking to the individual and how it lands with them. Sometimes I would say like the majority of people that book a session with me because they want to be understanding their purpose more fully, by the end of the conversation, I'm confirming what they already know. They're very few times is it something completely out of left wing that they can't, like, they did not even see that coming. So a lot of it is bringing kind of people's mastery that they already have more to the surface so that they can see how incredibly masterful it is. A lot of it is bringing the part that they already recognize as being purpose and making it more awe-filled. I think a lot of people expect purpose to be very mind-blowing and lots of fireworks connected to it. And so taking someone's purpose and speaking to it in such a way that it helps to animate it and vivify it, and so that the individual can step back a bit and look and be like, oh, like, yeah, now I see why that's relevant. I see why that's important. I didn't really see that before. I'll give you an example for myself. With my business, I assumed for a long time that the way to be, I'll say financially successful, because I always felt like personal success with my business, but I'll say financially successful with my business was to be able to work with larger numbers. So if I was booking a retreat, rather than 10 people, I need to be able to bring in 50. Same, workshop, all the things. And then I sat down with the teacher one day and she was like, how do you work best? And I'm like, I really love one-on-one and I love small groups, like max 10. And she just had a way of languaging the beauty and the significance of being able to teach in that way, and how many people appreciate it because it provides them a very safe space where they can be seen and they can really hammer out their questions and what it is that's coming forward for them. And so rather than me adjusting myself to fit into another mold of what I thought would be the better version of me, I instead looked at my prices and I was like, okay, if this is how I'm meant to be operating, the prices that I'm charging don't match. I can't live off of the price if I'm only making this for 5 or 6 people. So I adjust the price, and I'm aware that the people that want to be in that smaller space are willing to pay for it. And it's worked for me ever since. So it's just this way of being able to allow your purpose to be just very signature and let it be a part of your essence, not your vocation or the career or the job. It can be tied up in that for sure, but that's not the only place that it's meant to seep out. So if I'm talking to someone and sharing with them their purpose, I'm more speaking to the essence of their being and sharing that with them than saying like, okay, go back to school, get this degree, open up this and go from there. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So two things to unpack from what you said. So in other words, the journey is always in purpose because it will take us to the end result of where we have to be. So no matter what path we're gonna take, the universe and the contracts we sign will take us to the end result, to our purpose. If again, if we really want to get there.
Yeah, and I'm aware that I'm saying this on a recording, so don't make this gospel, but I would almost challenge a little bit further and say many of us can pick a very wandering road to align with our purpose, and others will take a direct path. And so, yes, we could always be connected to our purpose, but are you going to arrive there in this lifetime?
Yes, that's also true. Yes.
Yeah.
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 And what you said about you adjusting prices to keep the small number of participants, I can also give you an example. My wife went to Mexico to attend a 1,000 people event. The speaker was on the stage. They were able to see him. Uh, I think they were able to ask questions through intermediaries, through the staff. But the guy never came down through the rows, never talked to individuals. That was that. And then we went recently, we attended a 55-person event, and the organizer was right in front of us. He touched us, he did the healing, he worked with us on the floor, and he didn't leave until the last question was asked, and he stayed among us with the microphone in his hand, and it was a totally different type of experience. So yes, you are right, that personal contact, it's very valuable.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for affirming that for me.
Heather, you mentioned that you can read the Akashic of a tree, of a plant, of a stone. So my question is, have you tried to put in a book format all these stories of nature that you came in contact with?
I love it. So let me just highlight this. I get the guidance-ship to write a book. And now here I am sitting in a conversation with you, and you're asking me if I've written a book. Like, to those people that are listening, this is how it works. So I'm currently writing a book, but not specifically in the way that you're asking. I think that there's a lot of books written on the Akashic records where people go into case studies of like different people's sessions, and they relay the books. Like Edgar Casey, yeah, Todashki, those, Linda Howe does it a lot. So what I'm actually writing on is it's called The Space Between It, and so it's looking at clair abilities and really understanding how they show up, how beautifully sublime and incredibly loud they can be. And so my intention is to pull out, like, for me, the energetic realm is so far into the mystical that it needs to be brought more back into the practical. And when we assign people labels like gurus and leaders and legends and mystics and all the labels that we put, these archetypes, whether we're aware of it or not, it puts a boundary between the person and ourself, and creates a belief system that this person can do that and I can't. And so it's another form of outsourcing. And what I'm trying to do in the writing is to take our clair abilities, which are this beautiful tool between the physical senses that everyone's aware of, and any doctor will talk about your senses, but then you take them to a slightly more lighter form in the form of a clair ability, and then you've just lost half the population as to whether or not they're going to come on board with it. So my intention is to write in such a way that it normalizes clair abilities. It shows people how most of us are accessing them. We're just not even aware of how we're accessing them. So I give a lot of, that's where the storytelling comes in. I give a lot of examples of, this is how a clairvoyant can present. This is how a clairvoyant can present. There's even what I would call an inner clair and an outer clair with the clairs themselves. So I even separate them that way. And the intention is to really bring the reader into an understanding that this is just so normal, like brushing your teeth and getting dressed in the morning. And the mind is so exhausted from constantly having to drive the car all the time. And so the more that we can get back into the body and be relying on our instincts and the way that we relate to the world, I think it'll actually support a lot of our mental health crisis that we have right now, because the brain's just so tired.
Yes, indeed. And do you feel that this is a channeled book?
Yes. So when I'm writing on like clair audio, I'll before I write, I pause, I take a moment, I open up the records for clair audio and ask that the frequencies and the energies that work with clair audio to work through me and help to write. So I'm coming in with some of my own, pieces from different sessions that I've done with people that I've written down notes on and bringing those in. But then the way that it kind of becomes something that feels nice to read, that's definitely the Akashic records coming in. And then all the little hits of like, oh, don't forget this and don't forget that, and you need to explain this better. I mean, I fully feel like I'm working in companionship with the Akashic records of clairaudio or the Akashic records of claircognizance.
Yeah, it's interesting because maybe it is my intuition, but since I started writing many years ago, I just I put the intention out, please help me to write 5, 6, or 8 pages today. And then I take a moment and then I start writing. I don't hear any voice, but my pen is moving, my hand is moving and is writing page after page. And I say thank you at the end, and I end my day of writing, and I do the same I go through the same process next day.
Perfect. And so are some of your books published already, or are you in the
Yes.
process?
Yes,
Okay.
3 books already, an anthology. I'm writing right now the 3rd volume of the trilogy about water.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to check that out for sure.
Thank you. And we mentioned, or you mentioned labels, and I cannot avoid this type of label, is about ascending masters. What ascending masters are you working with?
Yeah, so we have so sometimes it's separated for someone and sometimes it's not. So some people work with the field, and when they go into the records, it is the entirety of the field that's working through them. And some people work specifically with individualized frequencies. So some of those frequencies are teachers. How I understand teachers are energies and frequencies that are coming in to support an unfolding, a growth, a development, and they will be there till it's actualized. So for some people, it's a week, a day, and for others, it's 4 lifetimes. Just depends on what's taking place. Then we have our guides, and it's important to appreciate that there's a version of yourself that has not incarnated. This is what we call the higher self or the I am self. And it's important to appreciate that this version of you is part of your guidance system. It really starts to take the hierarchy out between the higher dimensional realms and this earthly plane. And it amplifies for a lot of people the reverence of being able to trust their own choices, because it's them in the version that's just not incarnated. It just has a different viewpoint. But guides can also be other forms, and they can be shared amongst people. Like you and I could share a guide if we went into it and checked it out. And then ascended masters for me are archetypal frequencies that have been in physical form. They've passed on, and they haven't come back into physical form. So this would be like your Jesus Christ, Buddha, any of the Hindu goddesses, right? Like Saraswati and Durga. So any of those archetypes, green Tara, white buffalo woman, even well, I won't go into that, but yeah, it's that form of energy has had a lifetime on Earth, managed to reach enlightenment, and is now sitting in the dimensional realm. So because they're so omnipresent, they can be anywhere and everywhere all at once, and you can specifically pull in an ascended master's frequency to work with it on you to help to pull that from the inside out. So for me, archetypes can be worked either way. You can work an archetype from the inside where, let's say someone really loves Mother Mary, and so they want to work with the frequency of unconditional love. So they can go inside themselves and hunt for the place where they can feel and sense unconditional love, and then try and bloom it to the surface and let it wash through their whole body until their whole body feels like it's in a state of unconditional love. And we can work with it the opposite way. We can come and sit down in meditation and just be like, I'm so drained. I have no idea where unconditional love is within me. But I know that Mother Mary does it so well, so beautifully. So I'm gonna connect with that energy, and I'm going to ask that the unconditional love of Mother Mary come in and fill my cup. And so you can go external to internal or internal to external, works both ways. But that's how I understand ascended masters to be. And so when they can spontaneously appear. So I've had experiences where I open up someone's records, and usually when I open someone's records, the first thing I'll do is just share with them their their Akashic field. What does it feel like? What does it say? And I'm sharing it with them. I'm almost like describing it to them. And then we go wherever we want to go after that. But I've had experiences where as soon as I open up the records, it's like a blazing light of an ascended master right there. And then we just talk with it the whole time. And so it's choosing to work with the individual rather than the individual working with it. It can happen both ways.
Beautiful. And because you mentioned reading the Akashic records, you offer at the beginning of our discussion to try an experiment and maybe read the records for this podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a try?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So what I'll do here is I'll take just a moment to ground and center, and then I will do just an opening mantra. I'll see if I have to do a banishment mantra, and then we'll open it up and I'll see where it takes us. Okay?
Yes.
Give me one moment here. I'm just going to pull up my little mantra sheet that I like to use. Okay. And then spiritually inspired podcast. That's the name that you want me to be using?
Yes.
Okay. So closing your eyes, let yourself take just a few generous breaths. Use the exhale as agency to take you into the direction of release. The parts of your body that are in contact with the surface beneath you, let them resonate with it. Let them heavy and weight themselves into it. And then whether you want to picture it, feel it, or just know it, see if the energetic tethers can extend beyond the surface beneath you and go all the way down into the fabric of the earth. Continue to support this with the attention of the exhale. And let the earth do what she does best, which is support and nourish and offer a sense of safety. Casually turn your attention to the inhale. Let yourself breathe through your body rather than around your body. Notice if it zips right up or if it gently staircases through. Both are fine. And eventually your attention's gonna land right in the space of the crown of the head. And just how you anchor into the earth, let yourself anchor into the cosmos. It's a lighter form of anchoring, but it's still possible. And connecting to the space of the unknown, the space of the infinite realm, and the deep, deep mystery. Keep the attention here, and I'll just check in to see if I need to banish. Okay. So I'm banishing more just to have like a cleaner communication, just because there's a lot of different energies around us. So it's not like I'm banishing the bad, I'm just banishing like a clean slate, think of it. I hereby evict, revoke access, or send approval to all souls or beings that have access to the spiritually inspired podcast and are not serving its highest and greatest good in all timelines, dimensions, and realities. All souls or beings that are not serving its highest and greatest good, get out now. All souls or beings that Claudiu has given approval to that are not serving its highest and greatest good are hereby banned from its presence and its being in all timelines, dimensions, and realities. By my will, so it is. Deep breath in and out. Keepers of the Akashic records, please open the records for the spiritually inspired podcast and all names used in this lifetime. Create a safe and sacred space for its highest good and healing. Records are now open. Records are now open. The records are now open. So those records open immediately from the ground up. So it very cleanly just moved right through the body and out through the crown of the head. So it's obvious because of your podcast themes, but it's definitely connected to the agreement of ascension. So I'm going to get more information on that. So spiritually. It's almost like the podcast itself works with many different types of frequencies intentionally so that it can not be bound by culture, not be bound by language in a sense. It's meant to be able, like gender, age, it wants to be able to just reach in a way that is unbiased. So there's a lot of different types of frequencies that help to create the collective of the podcast itself. And it's designed this way. Then it's also pinging into your personality. So yeah, you shared with me that you're from Romania, and then there's a few other things you said at the beginning, but like, well, you live in Canada, you're from Romania, and then you're doing an energetic podcast. So just the fact that you have so many different modalities that make up you, it makes sense to me that the podcast wanted to be created through you. This is an important part. Whenever we have creative projects or businesses, we oftentimes think that they're created by our ideas. And how I kind of look at it is people put a prayer out to the universe, a petition. If prayer is too strong of a word, use the word petition. And the formation of a business or a creation is answer to prayer. And so the frequencies will find the individual or individuals that are best aligned with how to deliver the answer to prayer and be created through them. So by the time you get the idea, there's already so many layers in the background that have worked for you to arrive with the inspirational idea of a podcast. It's been set up long before the idea comes in. So okay, spiritually inspired. Anything else about the frequency of the pod? So it's also constantly moving, just so you know. I don't know if you're the type of individual that has lots of ideas and lots of different directions that you like to go. And maybe to you, sometimes it can feel like it gets scattered or disorientating. But this is actually like a thriving energy of your podcast, is to be very diversified and like, one week you're interviewing this, another week you're interviewing, and it might not feel like those topics relate, but that's actually like the joy of the podcast. It's life force energy is not to be defined, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
Any questions that you want to pitch or ask, or
Any direction or step I should take in order to increase my audience?
yeah, okay. So what are the ways in which membership and audience and listeners can amplify? One of the ways that you're invited is to open up the possibility to co-host with someone else. So to collaborate with someone else who has their own reach, their own pocket of individuals that they work with, but it's someone that you absolutely would love to be able to spend more time with. And so let's say you do release 4 podcasts a month, maybe 2 or 1 of those podcasts a month is like a co-hosted podcast with someone else. Okay. This is also just gonna pop you into different arenas that you don't normally go into, whether it's topics or the type of listener that comes in, or even where the conversation will go. You'll know you're there with the individual because it will feel very much alive within you, and you look forward to the co-hosting with. Okay. Any other ideas for? Do you spend any time when you release the podcast? Do you spend any time in a bit of a ceremony with the release of it, or is it more like technical where it just gets uploaded and you hit,
More technical.
Yeah. So there's a way that you can because you have such a strong energetic component to your system. When you've recorded and you're about to release, it can be 5 or 10 minutes, but like five minutes before, where you're allowing the energy of the podcast to percolate. You're calling in all the energies, frequencies, guides, teachers, however you language it, of the people that are meant to hear your podcast, to be able to clear the crown chakras of the people that they work with, so that when the download comes in some way, shape, or form to listen to this podcast, they're in a space where they can receive it and they'll hear it and tune into it. And then when you release it, hold the release, like hold the vision of where it's going. So rather than just hitting the button and then closing it down, hit the button, pause, close the eyes, and hold the calibration of where that's going to. And anytime you feel yourself kind of drop out of the calibration, just bring yourself up. So there's and what will happen simultaneously is the level of calibration of the ripple effect of the podcast itself is upgrading you to be able to hold the calibration of you to the same level. It wants to work same. Okay.
Interesting. Very good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else in relationship to growing and expanding? Do you have a way that your listeners can like go somewhere after the podcast that sort of directs back towards you, so that there's a certain percentage of your audience and listeners that are they're wanting a space where there can be more of like a group discussion on some of the things that you're offering, or it can be some sort of a community portal where does that make sense to you? Some way that your listeners can kind of, those that are interested, that want to be in more of a community with the others that are listening, that there's a space that can be provided for them. And what I'm getting here is this doesn't have to be immediate, but something that you can start to lean into and think about of, yeah, some people are happy listening and going about their days, and others, they're wanting to feel more collaborative or more community-based.
I did have a Patreon space, didn't go anywhere, so I had to cancel it. Other than that, people can reach me out through my website and direct messages, because I have all my links in the description and every single video. So, but for a community, I only had the Patreon space for a while.
Okay. This is something that because there's a what you're going to start to pay attention to is the people that come to you through your website or the channels that you have. Start to see the common thread that happens with it, because you get that perspective, they don't. So you can, like, for me, it's like, well, everyone seems to be booking and wanting to answer questions about either their clair abilities or purpose. So I'm just going to put that right on the website, because that seems to be the type of niche that I attract with people. So pay attention to that through line that you have with the majority of your clients, and then use that as the space that you're developing the space from, should you choose to in the future. And this is more like the audience grows because there's a deeper place that they're landing into. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
So
very
those
much.
are the three tops to start to play with. And then that's kind of how I'll work, is there's 3 action steps there. If I keep going, you're going to get a little bit overwhelmed. So start with those and then see where they take you, and then go in and check after they've all been kind of implemented. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Heather. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else that the Spiritually Inspired podcast wants to share or come through? Do you share a lot on your Romanian background?
People know that I have the Romanian background, but I'm not doing anything specific with Romanian content yet.
It's not so much it's more there's a personal story, there's a personal experience that can be pulled forward and brought into the way that you share and offer with your listeners. But the part that's coming through is just one of the facets, when I'm saying that it's a multifaceted sort of container with a lot of different threads that make up the podcast. One of those lines of energy is the Romanian line, and it's just neglected.
Okay.
And that's how it wants to, There you go. So I'll let you play with it the way that it wants to be played with, but it feels like it's being left behind, and it has a lot to offer.
Yes, Romania is a interesting place from an energetic perspective. There are a lot of portals, high mountains, beautiful country. So I will have to think about that aspect of what you just said. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Does that feel complete? Anything else
Yes.
before I
No.
close?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, let me close here. We give thanks and gratitude to the keepers of the Akashic records for the guidance, healing, knowledge, wisdom, and information that the spiritually inspired podcast has received today. Records are now closed. Records are now closed. Records are now closed.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah.
Heather, let's talk about your programs and what you offer. I know in November, I think you have a retreat in Mexico. Let's expand on that, please.
Yeah, so I love being in person with people. Most of my work is done online. And so this is just an awesome opportunity for people to be able to be in person with each other, to be able to expand and explore the layers of consciousness that want to be heard through them without the distraction of whatever everyday life is for them. So I offer a retreat once a year. It's for anyone that feels called. It's also for people that have worked with me in the past so that we can actually hug and hang out, because you get so close to people online. It's like, it's hard to believe that you don't actually know them in flesh. So it's that type of a gathering. It is very intimate, 13 people. I'm just over halfway full. It's November 2nd to 8th in a beautiful eco retreat center called Playa Viva. And I intentionally seek out spaces on the planet that we're using nature as our guidance system when we're there. So yes, I designed some content, and we're going to do some yoga, and we'll have some great conversations. We'll do some movement practices. We'll do some meditative practices. And there's a tremendous amount of free time to be able to walk the beaches, to go for hikes. If you want to, we have a temazcal one day, a cacao ceremony. We have a dinner on the beach the last evening. So I really try and bring in all of the Akashic elements in to create the most potent experience that we can have. So I title it Let It, and I allow the let it energy of what wants to come through by the group that gathers to lead and guide. Yeah. Thanks
And
for
for
asking. That's my most.
yes, I checked the place on your website and it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very lovely. And I always get like reviews from other teachers that have hosted there before to see how they feel about it. And it's one of the most popular ones. So I have that. And then if anyone wants to, I have a monthly membership on my website as well, called Alchemy Mentorship. And this is a different theme each month where we talk about a topic in consciousness, and I bring it right down into the everyday life and make it applicable to how we're doing our day. And the second live gathering each month is a meditation on that topic. And then we have a member spotlight. So someone from the membership portal comes on screen, and we just do a Q&A together. And it's really beautiful how much we can learn by listening to someone else's stories and experiences, and see how close they are to our own. So yeah, those are the two things that I'd recommend people check out.
Thank you. And regarding the cacao ceremony, is it you who's leading the ceremony, or are you bringing someone else from outside, like an elder or shaman?
The temazcal and the cacao ceremony are both led by people on the retreat. So they bring in local indigenous people for those. Yeah.
Interesting. And is just pure cacao, or they add something else as a like a
No, I think it's just cacao. Yeah, that's all it is. It's just the cacao. There's no other medicinal properties in there. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I did
I'm not
attend.
I'm not at a place as a practitioner to be leading those yet. I'm open to them for myself and having conversations on them, but I think I have some fears around liability that I need to work through before I start to offer something like that.
Yes, I did interview Angela de la Agua. She lives in the Joshua Tree Desert, and she's an expert in this type of ceremonies. And I have a friend who attended one of them, and he was quite impressed. And I personally been part of cacao ceremony here in Canada, and it was a beautiful experience.
Yeah, they're lovely. Yeah, they really
Yes.
are. Mhm.
Heather, what is your perception of God, universe, divine?
In this moment, total immersion of present moment. Whenever I allow myself to be immersed in present moment, I feel like I'm in the space of God. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
What's yours?
Uh, Pretty much similar, living fully every single moment, especially after experiencing the possibility of not being here anymore. That's even more precious. So you really enjoy, and I try to detach myself from the 3D existence as much as possible, become indifferent to daily distractions and focus more on what brings me joy, like this podcast, writing, being in nature, and being with my family. And the fact that for 4 years we spent so much time together due to what happened in the world brought us together. I mean, we went to Panama and we spent 24 hours together. Then we came back to Canada and we spent 24 hours together. And there is no bickering, there is no animosity. So that's beautiful in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, such an honor to be in your presence today. Thank you for bringing such a rich conversation forward.
Thank you, Heather. And because we are approaching the end of the interview, any final thoughts?
No, I feel, yeah, I feel like that's complete.
Thank you very much once again. Good luck with all your programs. And I wish your community will grow richer as you wish mine to be built over time.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Leave a comment, share it with your friends, visit spiritualinspired.ca. And until next time, love and gratitude.